So there's definitely a change going forward after this week. So this is the week of February 3rd and the following 7 days, February 3rd, 2025. Hello, 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 hello. Welcome. How you doing there? My name is G, and this is a weekly video. We do these videos once a week where we talk about the energetic setup, the planets up in the sky, where we try to figure out what's going on up there so we can better understand what's going on down here. These two together, what are they doing? Well, the story with Venus and Mercury is that Mercury is going to be making a move, and they're siblings, they're sisters. They're always talking. So in my mind, it always is really smart to find out where they're at, what signs they're in, and then, kind of get an understanding of the discussion that they're having as they're sitting at the table. Venus has probably got a glass of wine. Mercury's probably got multiple things, even if it's not multiple things at the same time, because Mercury likes variety. Mercury might start off with a glass of water and ask for a hot cup of coffee and want a cold cup of, water, maybe some ice cubes on the side with the coffee. And then before you know it, Mercury might end up having, I don't know, one of those adult drinks before the meeting is over. And Venus probably just started off with, if it wasn't wine, Venus might have been like, I might need a few shots. I might need a few shots at this discussion. So there's Venus, right? So the money, the finances, the banking, my values, which can be a little on the dreamy side. It might not be rooted in reality because it's going to be super de-duper idealistic, a little fantastical, think Hollywood and dreams. And I feel like I'm kind of asleep and, you go ahead and take care of it. I'm just going to sit back and read this book, or I'm listening to some music right now, or Kelgon, take me away. I want to escape. That's where Venus is. She's in the escape mode, right? And it's not just her, right? We got the North Node there, Pisces energy. It wants to escape. This can be peace and understanding and unity. It can also be surrender. It's Pisces. Can be public figures. Can have to do with the justice system because we think Jupiter, ancient ruler, right? And Neptune, things can be confusion. So the North Node and a confusion about where my values are headed, right? So we think of the tariffs that were promised and how there's a history of what tariffs do for the United States when they impose tariffs. There's history, and so we have a kind of a track record to tell us what that means. So there might be people, because I was about to call Venus a chameleon in Pisces, because this is the actor, right? Which means I get on the stage, and then in the next scene, I probably have to change my clothing, and I might even have to play a whole different role, even though I'm in the same movie. You see, because that's Pisces energy. So Venus is here, right? But she's at critical degree now. So that critical degree is usually a public figure, someone with a lot of money or extreme wealth, somebody in power. We usually hear about it, right? And it's my values of my future and what we're going to do about the money of the future. So possibly interest rates is part of this conversation. And then Neptune's there, 28 degrees. Neptune and North Node are both at 28. So Neptune can be, it rules Pisces, okay? And this is the institutions for society, usually healing institutions, right? Many times when we think of Neptune, we can think like the Navy, right? But more Mars in Neptune, we would think Navy because a fighter in the water, right? But we think of healthcare for possibly those who have served because Virgo is at the opposite energy of Neptune. And the South Node is there, with the Black Moon Lilith. You see, they're together. They're together. And where you see Black Moon at that 29 critical degree, right? She stands still there and then she moves forward. Okay, so that's how we start the week off. Ask what the hell is Mercury reporting on, right? Remember the story at the beginning. Her and Venus are sitting down and talking. Even if they can't physically be together, whatever kind of a call they're having, they're having it and they're talking about what they're going through because they're both in different signs right now. Mercury's in Aquarius, which is shocks and surprises and unfamiliar territory, possibly. It's different, it's new. It's even though I might be with my friends, there's something different about it, right? Different communications and conversations. And the friends that I'm talking to, they're probably global partners or discussions about whether I have global partnerships and diplomacy. That's the situation Mercury is in right now. Venus is sibling. So Mercury is a little bit under stress because Mercury beginning the week at 10 degrees is all about being the boss and the one in charge. And it's just like, yeah, I'm calling the shots, right? And then what's going to happen is Mercury is going to catch up to the sun. Venus is going to move and she'll be at 0 degrees in Aries. So when you have Venus, my values, my money, and my desire, right? When you put Venus in Aries energy, Aries starts something. It initiates, it begins, it takes action. Well, Aries energy is Mars. So that's war. That's weapons, right? Now, does it have to be just war and weapons? No. Does that mean we're starting a war? No. It doesn't mean that at all. However, it could have a lot to do with the withdrawal, or what's the word? Withdrawal with withholding. How about we go with that one? How about we don't support, we're not sending weapons over to Ukraine anymore? How about that? That's a better way of putting it because I can't speak right now. That might be an example because it's a new beginning because it's based on our new set of values. Like when Venus went through Pisces, Pisces dissolves things. It makes it confusing. And if we're talking money and finances, desires and values, Venus can very likely change her tune. She can change her tune. All right. She can think one way at the beginning of Pisces, have a different opinion by the middle of Pisces. And then by the time she met up with the South Node and Neptune, it looks completely different. She's totally saying something different altogether. So when she gets over here in Aries, Venus is a little bit more fired up and feisty. She's got a little bit more energy. She was quite laid back here in Pisces. So now she's fired up, right? And she may be saying, I need freedom and independence. So there may be, as that example, well, these are our weapons, not yours. We're not giving them to you. We're not supporting your cause anymore. We're not basically supporting democracy, which is what that would mean if that happens. So what is going to happen to Venus when she gets into Aries? Remember, she comes a little bit feisty and fiery, and she becomes a little bit more impatient about her values. She takes on some of the Mars qualities, right? She takes on some of that. Now, she's going to get to 3 degrees on the 9th. At that same time on the 9th, this is when Mercury and the sun are conjunct at 21 degrees in Aquarius energy, right? Mercury and the sun are going to sit here together at 21 degrees. And sitting there at 21 degrees, I want you to think of Jupiter at 21 degrees. Freedom comes up again, doesn't it? Especially in Aquarius energy, but also travel and supply chain, because that's all Aquarius. It's supply chain energy, the justice system, going on vacation and traveling. Now, we think authority figures also. Authority figures are going to be key with this because it's Jupiter, meaning it's Jupiter by the degree, 21 degrees. That's the Jupiter degree. Okay. But it's something new and different and unconventional. So it's group energy, remember, but maybe new, different is in terms of transportation. What about science and medicine and space? That's part of this as well because it's in Aquarius. So this Mercury conjunct the sun on this day at those exact degrees. Pay attention on this day for yourself in your life, in your chart. On the 9th of February, Mercury is normally combust and burnt up, and we don't have good information when Mercury's close to the sun. However, when Mercury and the sun match an exact degree, it's a short moment of time. It's a short window because Mercury moves fast. But there's a time slot in there where you're going to get some information. And it will likely come in like a lightning bolt and really quick, really fast. Might be a little bit of a surprise. Might be like, kind of came out of nowhere. Maybe it's news and information. Maybe it comes from a sibling and a coworker, a peer, a teacher. Maybe comes from online, but always be cautious about that stuff online, right? For every, you may come across one solid, true information piece, and the 9 other pieces of information you came across were crap. That's super possible. But typically, the teaching is when these two are conjunct like this, exactly 21 degrees, okay, on the 9th of February, a belief for sure. Something about your future. Maybe it's just about the travel for the future. Maybe you're making travel plans for your future. Maybe it has to do with college education and teachers, extended education. Whatever that is, write it down, jot it down, make a mental note, do whatever you have to do, and see how that works out for you. Test it. Never simply say, okay, this is bam, wham, it's perfect, it's what it is. You always got to test what you think might be true, because that is absolutely the spirit of Aquarius energy. These are the scientists. Scientists run tests, and I mean tests after test after test. They run tons of tests. They have to prove the shit. They have X amount of tests, right? So the point is, after all these tests, it's like, okay, well, 9 out of 10 times it came up this way. And yes, there is always going to be a degree for that one time it didn't, okay? Because that's the way it works. So global stuff, global banking, because Pluto's at 2 degrees. We talked about this last week. And Venus is in Aries at 3 degrees, which speaks to what we're thinking about in terms of our values and our freedoms, our body autonomy, your civil liberties, maybe the wars going on in different places, feminine energy, the war against women, the continuation, the saga. This can be the markets, the stock market, the housing market. This can be that. But it's got more of a global feel to it because of this, Mercury and the sun, while Venus is at 3 degrees. So there's a strong connection. That makes it kind of a strong connection. And it also brings Mars back into the fold because Mars rules Aries. So we go back up and look at Mars, and it's barely moving. It starts the week off at 19 degrees here, and it only goes to 18. It's moving in it's in a commando crawl. It is kind of the lone wolf, but it is, but it isn't, because it's working within the public. So I always have concerns when we're dealing with Mars energy. And this is an out of bounds Mars. We've been talking about it. Out of bounds means it goes even more extreme. Mars is extreme all on its own because it has no patience, and it's like a child. It's like a 6-year-old in the sandbox. When another child comes in, the other child can be a bully, or the other child comes in and wants to play. But either way, now they're both screaming and crying and kicking and throwing sand at each other. They're both pissed. This is energy that's very childlike. It's the child of the zodiac. It takes a long time to grow up. So it begins this week at the 19 degrees and it ends off at 18. Begins at 19. 19 degrees, significant one-on-one relationships. And then the 18 degrees, because we're going down in numbers because it's in a retrograde, that takes us to the Virgo energy. Day-to-day routines, it goes back to domestic energy at 18 degrees. Mars is already impatient all by itself because that's Mars. When Mars does a retrograde, it becomes even more irritated and impatient, easy to anger. When Mars is out of bounds during a retrograde, it's all those things times 10. Unbelievably combative, where it's not just combative words. We need to be super cautious because everybody's under the impression of this. Everybody's feeling this. So we just have to understand this is werewolf time. You ever watch the old movies with the werewolf, the black and whites? Remember? What did he do? He knew he was a werewolf. He knew when the moon turned a certain way, he became the wolf, right? Do you ever see the ones where he's where the wolf man meets Frankenstein and Dracula? He's asking oh yeah, Abbott and Costello are in that one. And he asks them, "Will you please lock me in my room?" He knows that he needs to be alone. Otherwise, he will do damage. And that's Mars. Mars does its best work when it's alone, or at least at the front of the line and leading in some way. But in order for Mars to be leading in a way that's healthy and good, it has to do it where it's not so much about the ego, where it's kind of already shed its ego, where it's really doing it for a spiritual purpose. It's not doing it to harm anybody. It's not ever doing it to be revengeful or vengeful, because that's not what that high operating Mars energy works. When it matures over time like the fine wine, it's done fighting. It says, I'm going to show you. I'm going to use words and I'm going to show you with my action. And so, like the werewolf, he asked for help and said, "Can you put me in my room? That way I won't hurt anybody. Put me in my room, but I need you to lock the door and take the key." It was the symbology. It was the whole point that he was mature and knew and didn't want to harm people, but knew that when he was under the influence, he would kill people. And he just wanted to die at the end of the day. He really wanted his life to end. It was a curse for him. And a Mars out of bounds in our emotions. Yeah, in our emotions. And that's Cancer energy, our emotions. Our emotions get the best of us and we only see red. Authority figures, someone in charge, the Sun and Mercury, we're going to get a communication likely to do with money and values and banking, soldiers, war, the military, news about the military, the direction, the supply of ammunitions and weapons and technology, whether we're going to share it anymore, whether we're not. We also we have Hera and Elgo conjunct here. They're both at 26 degrees. And we see Uranus is still sitting there at 23. Uranus was a big deal last week. It's still part of the story this week. It's still part of this week's story because when you have Mercury and the Sun at 21, that creates an exact square to Uranus. So it's like two authority figures clash here. Uranus with Hera and Elgo there, banking, my values and money, my desire, usually feminine energy because Venus rules Taurus. So again, you see where Venus is, right? Where she was and where she went. Venus flips quite a few times here. And then you see Mercury and the Sun in that square that they have with Uranian energy. Yeah. And the Sun moves 1 degree a day. By the end of the week, Mercury's going to end up, did I write it down where Mercury ends up this week? By the end of the week, we're going to have Mercury sitting there at, 22, at 22. So even though there's not a whole lot in the in-betweens of this week, from the 3rd leading up to, it's like the end of the week is the big story, right? The weekend, again, becomes the more intense time because that's when Mercury and the Sun get together and they start squaring. But don't forget about Juno. significant one-on-one relationships. Remember, this is ruled by Pluto and Mars, and Pluto has made its move to the 2 degrees in Aquarius. Values, global banking. This Juno is trining this whole week. Juno is not a fast mover. Juno is trining this whole week, first with Venus, but then with Neptune and the North Node. So there's definitely a change going forward after this week. And it's definitely a change in shared values. And do we still all hold the same values? Did I mention Pallas Athena is at 25-26 in Capricorn, strategizing for the future? You see that? So that's a strong sextile energy, which makes the top part of that, the top part of the kite, even though this is an upside down kite, so that we're not confused here. She makes this what they call sometimes a baby trine, the top part of this kite. So I think there's going to be big moves on the big stage, and that was kind of what last week's chart looked like too. But here we see where Venus moving into Aries, which means we're now taking action with what we discussed and talked about last week. So what we're going to be hearing about is the actions that are now going to be taken. This can look a lot of different ways, okay? There can be a lot of different meanings for all of this. I hope I gave different ideas of different ways this can show up in the world and in your life. If you have questions, put them in the comments, because you're probably, for some of us, it might be like, well, what do I care what NATO does? Some folks that, they, their brains in other places. Okay. So just understand that when things occur globally, it's just like what happens up there happens down here, right? As above, so below. Well, it doesn't just happen in one place, so below. It happens to the planet. So the point is that we like to live as though we're in our own fishbowl, and they're in their own fishbowl over there, and they're in their own fishbowl over there. We got like all these little fishbowls all over the planet, and we're not interconnected in any way, but we know that we are. We know there's this vast ocean, this vast body of water that we all share, right? Yeah, that connects all the land essentially. So, there's, whether it's jobs, right? Yeah, jobs changing, because when global stuff ships, shipping, space, science, the military, those are all jobs. Government jobs especially. Government jobs especially. And I kind of went in depth a little bit about that last week. Government jobs, because there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak, right? There's a new department head. And whenever there's a new department head, they usually make changes. And those changes are usually felt through my job, it really depends what kind of a job you have and where you work. But I can't ignore the Venus factor and the rights and the physical appearances and my civil liberties and my body, yeah, my freedoms, my rights, and my business type of thing. So with that, I'm done. I'm out. Take care. I will see you in the next one. Remember, I always appreciate your time. Bye-bye.